So I'm watching, anyway, and so the movie starts, and I'm like, this is actually pretty well done. And what I'm seeing is, so I've got one of those, if I feel like I'm being preached to, like I've got a hair trigger, like it's like a wall goes up. And my wall stayed down for the majority of this movie's running time because I felt like consistently it was doing a pretty good job of, like, honestly, like, I'll watch, I don't know, Jared, how many fucking satanic horror movies have I watched in my life? 1,000?
You mean this week?
It doesn't bother me at all, right? Like, I have no problem watching The Exorcist and a bazillion Exorcist clones and Last Night with the Devil, like, whatever. Like, but I've got a thing where if I'm watching something on the other side and I feel like I'm being preached to, like a wall's going to go up and you lose me. And like all the way up until, I love the scene where he's talking to one of the disciples and the disciple is going, I don't know. We're trying to figure this out too. And I'm like, wow, this is, and then in like, when they get to the fucking beach at the end, it's like, all right, thumb's got to go on the scale hard. And it swings all the way into, fuck, I'm watching a fucking Christian movie. And I want to throw the table over because up until that point, I'm like, actually, this is like, if it had stayed as neutral as it was all the way to the end, I would have liked it a lot better. But weirdly, this movie had me on its side for the majority of its running time. And
it's just a fantasy film.
Right. I wrote down, it's any other fucking supernatural fantasy movie. And honestly, I mean, who wouldn't want to hang out with cool, loving Jesus? Be honest with you. Like, this is the Jesus that MAGA does the opposite of. Like, this.
They hate this movie.
They hate this fucking guy. Like, this is a warm, loving, healing presence. He makes grown men cry at the drop of a hat. Like,
makes you smile all the time.
I get.
The only
dynamite smile.
The only person who he interacts with outside of the apostles and Clavius is a leper who he gives a fish to after stopping people from beating him and throwing him out of the town, and then wraps his cloak around and heals him. Like this is the Jesus that my mother believes in. This is the Jesus that my mother preaches about on Sundays. Like,
and I think about we'll talk about Life of Brian later, but like I think about my favorite scene in Last Temptation of Christ is Willem Dafoe's Sermon on the Mount, right? Because the way he plays that scene, like you totally if the person as it is reflected in this movie existed at that time, I could totally understand why we're still talking about it 2,000 years later. Wait, this is the greatest story ever told, right? Like I got sucked into the fucking greatest story ever told because it was taking a fairly neutral perspective on the whole thing until the end where I'm like, okay, well, obviously this was aimed at maybe the audience that several $1 billion of Passion of the Christ. Right. And they have to like go off the deep end into
Reynolds has called this a sequel to Passion of the Christ.
Right.
Like,
well, I get
that's
it.
how it kind of started out. Yeah.
A little late to the party.
Well, mind you, I
think three quarters.
I mean, he made this movie made $46 million at the box office.
It did pretty well.
It cost $20 million.
Yeah. I could tell because the Roman legion was very tiny.
It looked pretty fucking good. I mean, it was well shot. I thought like atmosphere, like. Yeah, I mean, again, it
was in the scene at the beginning. I'm like, you guys need more Romans in this scene.
No, but that's the thing is this is
the Roman army is like 8 people.
Yeah, but this is where you set the fuck ups.
That's true.
Like you don't.
These guys are garrison are not actually like
this is the very very edge of the Roman Empire.
Yeah,
and it's like, all right, we're gonna send our shitheads out here, and a lot of them are gonna die against these Jewish idiots. And that scene at the beginning is one of the best classical era battles I've ever seen.
When they turn their shields into a ramp up to the
that was
and they're getting fucked up the entire time before that.
They show how they use the pilium, where actually it breaks off and they throw
use the piliums.
Yeah, and the quincunx and how to use the properly use the scatha. You know, it's like
he throws that first one. Joseph Fiennes throws that first one, hits the one dude, and then the rest of them are like, oh, okay, like we're gonna stop standing here in rows and getting taken out by boulders being rolled down the hill.
Actually throwing rocks at them, it was actually fairly effective because it had the high ground. So
rocks and arrows.
Yeah,
like
that's all you need,
until they do the full pilium and shield wall, like they're getting fucked.
Yeah,
like
that was actually a very effective scene. Good way to start the film too, in terms of like showing these guys putting the locals down a little
brutally violent.
Yeah. The Romans were that was their shtick.
The crucifixion where he was describing what having nails driven through your feet and like how that
you're gonna feel this rubbing on your bone.
Yeah, right. Like that was pretty good too.
Oh my god.
Well, when Pilate's like, go break his legs.
Yeah.
Like, and if you know the story, you know that they're not going to break his legs, but you even have that moment of like, they're gonna fucking break his legs, aren't they? And then he shows up and Mary's wailing in the corner, and it's like, well, actually, okay, don't break, just stab him, just go get the spear.
He did that. Remember, he did that thing, that gesture. Like, oh my god, that's great.
Well, at first he does that, and then he's like, all right, stop.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really effective.
I looked at the production companies. So obviously you see the Sony logo first, but then it's followed by a parade of production companies, of which I know
LD is owned by Sony.
Right, but there's so this
they have a faith-based production company.
This is a faith-based. So I guess I was maybe deluding myself and thinking it was going to be like kind of like is he or isn't he?
I was
like nope.
I was going to address that, Chris. You said you were on like the whole, because I've seen films like this where you don't show miracles. You say he could have been just this guy, this charismatic guy, or he could have been Jesus Christ. You don't know until the end, and maybe the end is a whole mystery for you. You know, I've seen films that do that. This one actually, when he goes in, that fantastic scene where he goes in that room and there's Jesus. Jeshua actually with the marks in his palms and the side.
No, it's in his wrist.
In his wrist. And the thing is, okay, these guys are just this is straight out of the Gospels. It's like they're gonna he came back to life and he fucking vanished, man.
It actually happens a little earlier, Scott, when you have the Shroud of Turin.
Oh, I love that. I love that
he comes in and he like moves aside.
But I'll tell you,
and he says like, did you anoint him? What did you do? And they're like, well, we didn't have enough time, so we just did myrrh and aloe. And he's
I'll tell you, I've watched 1,000 fucking horror movies where if we were talking about Satan or devil possessed, none of that I would not have batted an eyelash. This is exactly how these movies go.
Well, this movie addresses, actually, which is wild, it addresses some of the contradictions in the Bible. Like when they get to that he gets to that room and he tells his little guy to go away, and then he goes in and he disappears, and the disciples are like, well, what do we do now? And Peter's like, well, he told us to stay here, we have to stay here. And then Mary is like, no, on the road when he came to me, you have to go to Galilee. And that's literally a contradiction in the different books of the Bible. Did they stay in Jerusalem for the entire time before?
Yeah, that's what there's one book. That's what Peter says. Another book is what Mary Magdalene said.
Right. Is it Pentecost either happens in Jerusalem or in Galilee, depending on which book of the Bible you're reading? Yeah.
There's some interesting parallels. This is kind of weird. The Mary Sue character from the Star Trek mythology. Sure. This is kind of a Mary Sue gospel, where someone's saying, imagine if you were just this random tribune who was in law enforcement in Judea when this all happened, and how you would, if you saw this stuff, how would you react to it?
Well, but
that's the essential story, basically.
And this is what would have happened. The Romans would have been like, oh, fucking, we have to deal with this shit. And then and there's the whole thing with there's the local Jews who also are like, oh, we gotta
we have
deal
to
with
deal
this
with
Oh, the
shit.
Pharisees were much harder on this whole thing than
Right.
anybody else. Yeah,
The-
and yeah, as usual. But again, this scene where he's backing out of the room and he kind of like the sun's behind him. It was this kind of they throw parallels to Saul of Tarsus all the time in this. Like he was going to be one of the
Right. Yes,
yeah.
he is obviously a stand-in for Paul.
Yeah, for Paul.
Like
Yeah.
it's very much like, oh well, I've been oppressing these people this entire time. I have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, yes.
Like I'm gonna murder Barabbas, and
Yeah.
then I have to go watch Christ get crucified, and then all right, I guess I'm going to believe in this guy because
Yeah.
of all this bullshit that I went through, you know.
Right.
Like it is very, yes, he is very obviously a stand-in for Paul.
Yeah,
like,
which is what's going on here. Yeah, in a lot of ways.
And
But,
you know, Claudius could have been born in, you know, Tarsus, part of a Pharisee, a Jewish family or whatever. Like you don't know, like
you don't know.
because when you pledge yourself to the Legion, you get sort of baptized into the Roman Empire. And like maybe there was supposed to be some of that. I don't know. Like they were definitely trying to keep to a sub 2 hour running time. Like,
also, what do you think a tribune? He was a tribune of Rome. I mean, it's like that's a pretty high up level stuff.
The tribune of the army was like the second officer in a legion.
Oh, really?
So
it's just okay.
The legate is like the colonel.
Yeah,
and he's like a captain.
Right.
So he's in charge of a couple of centuries.
It's not the same thing as a senatorial tribune.
No.
I didn't know that.
No, he's just he's a dude. He's a dude.
Kinds.
He's a dude who's allowed to have an apartment in Pilate's house. He's not up. He's in the middle.
He's on his way up.
He's in an equestrian rank. I mean, he's not a low class Roman.
No, and Pilate is specifically in the early part of it, like, you want to be me. Like, like you're in line to have this position.
You're going to have this somewhere else later on. You're going to toe the line. Yeah. Peter, was that Peter Firth?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
he's one of the better pilots I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you know the best pilot.
Yes,
the best pilot is fucking Michael Palin.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you that.
But again,
the funniest pilot anyway.
But again, the thing I like about him is he is so believable as this character, as somebody who's just like, I don't even fucking want to be here. Like, why?
Bureaucrat.
Why are you making this? Why are you making this my fucking problem?
Longer than the other governors.
And he goes, and at the beginning, you think he's gonna wash his hands in that little font that he's got there, and he doesn't.
Yeah,
and he just he drinks the wine, and he's talking to him, and he drinks the wine, and then he goes over to that pool and he washes his hands in the pool, and it's like, you washed your hands. That's it. There it is.
Okay, he eventually did. That's pretty good.
All we were missing was his wife.
Also, there's a bit in the beginning where they asked about his followers, and he says, "Hey, how many disciples are there? There's 12. Oh, actually,
no, there's 11.
There's 11.
11. Yeah, it's a long story.
They don't say anything else about Judas, but that was pretty good.
I also like that Bartholomew's just fucking insane.
Like
he's just got that big fucking weird smile on his face.
He's like T.J. Miller, right?
Yeah.
He's just goofy. He's a big goofy hippie who's like happy all the time. It's like great.
And Jesus is everywhere.
Yeah,
right. That's the best part. Where he's like, "Do I have your word?" And he's like, "Yeah, you have my word." And he gets up and he's like, "He's everywhere."
Yeah, that's good stuff. There's also a bit where just in general, like when the disciples are just grinning and happy all the time when they were in his presence, and it was
even Peter seems.
It was very strange for a film like this to kind of see people with blissed out and like it was.
That's the best scene. That's the best scene in the movie, Chris. That is the best scene in the movie.
Yeah,
where he's like, just let us go.
Let us go.
Don't. And then he goes at him.
What are you fucking doing, man?
He disarms him, and then he's like, "No one has to die here today." And then he gives him the sword back.
Right.
Like, it's not just, he doesn't do the whole like, "You don't have to do this," and throw the gladius away. He's just like, "We're done."
Yeah.
Like you get to go and be what I was supposed to be, and let us leave.
Also, it pays off earlier on. I asked him what he wanted, and he says, "I want a day where no one dies."
Where no one dies.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, that actually goes all the way up to the Christian mythology thing.
Well, and he makes the tribute even to Mars, and it's just like, let me deal with this. Like, I'll make games in your name and all of that stuff. Like, he's just done.
Yeah.
Like you can see it through the whole movie is how much he has no desire to be involved in this system anymore. Like, he's looking for a way out from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think overall, if I was going to recommend a film to somebody with a Christian theme that wasn't going to be either hokey, like, the greatest story ever told, or like that, and wasn't like really dense, I'd recommend this, because it's actually it's a fast moving story. The second half is just like it's literally on the run. It's a nice way to kind of cut into it,
Well, so
Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth.
That's a pretty good one.
I'd still probably point to Last Temptation of Christ, but then Sandy and I watched about an hour of, I think it's called Last Something in the Desert with Ewan McGregor. And it's about, look it up. It's Ewan McGregor, and it's basically when Jesus allegedly went to the desert for 40 days to fast.
And the devil tempts him.
And he's tempted by the devil.
Yes.
Wait, this is Simon but this is a remake of Simon in the Desert.
Kind of, yeah. That, I mean, it was also, it's very arty, but I thought it was pretty, I mean, like, again, this is what the greatest story ever told. It is a fascinating story on its face if you can get past all the religious mumbo jumbo.
What I like about this movie is the perspective of the Roman legionary who is completely outside of all of this. Like, he's not Peter or John or Bartholomew or any of those people. He's just this guy who has to deal with it, and then has his conversion happen in a very natural way, a way that anyone can kind of understand.
I thought he was really good in this movie.
When he walks into the room, Joseph Fiennes is fantastic.
I thought he was great. I mean, like, some of the expressions on his face when he's like, "I can't fucking believe what I'm seeing right now." That was
when he walks into the room and he behind you and sees him.
Yeah,
and he's just like,
"What the fuck?"
Yeah. Right.
Also, when Jesus disappears,
like I said, it's like, what?
He's got this look of incredulity.
Actually, he said, "What just happened?" And most disciples like, "I have no idea what just happened."
Well, and I love
but
that.
then again, they kind of
stuff I really liked when the disciples are like, "I don't fucking know what's going on. It's just awesome."
Even at the end of the movie, when Peter's like, "All right, so like, are you coming with us?" And he's like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "Well, we're going back to Jerusalem and we're going to start a church." And he's like, "I'm going to go walk for a long time."
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, awfully quiet, Jared.
Jared hated.
I'm kind of more. Yeah, I'm a PK. I was raised in this, and I got rid of it. I got it out of my brain and my heart at a pretty young age by choice. I'm more in the camp of Chris with
hey, John arrived.
I think this is actually a conviction for speeding for John.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. I was like 90 miles an hour.
No, Jesus Christ is behind me.
Sorry.
But I tend to agree with Chris's initial take, where I thought, they're kind of doing. I think the movie would have been a lot better had it been taken the stance of it just would have been a fun movie if it would have been they just like stole his body and it was more like a investigation like movie where the Tribune had to like figure out what the hell is happening. These guys actually stole a dead body, and where did they put it? And that's hilarious.
No, weirdly enough,
hold on. I just want to say I agree with you. Like, I think that's a very interesting movie. That's just not what this movie is.
It's not this movie.
But the middle third of the film is weirdly enough almost investigative.
It's a detective story.
Yeah. It's like
I was impressed just in terms of like, this is a movie with Joseph Fiennes going to people and them telling him a story. It's like his
Yeah.
goes from person to person to person to try to find out. So it's
like
a detective story.
like Citizen Kane.
Yeah,
where
Yeah.
he
you like
keeps
Yeah.
going.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Like-
it's interesting. It's
But I'm-
involving. It's
But I'm with Chris. I have somewhat of, I also like horror films. I like disturbing films. Obviously you guys know that. But yeah, whenever religion comes in, I just get this, like, maybe it's because I was raised that way. I
This
get
is-
this like
But
weird.
no,
Also,
wait,
most religious
whenever
films are
religion
pretty
comes
junky.
in that
That's
is
the
not
thing.
Right.
Satan.
Yeah.
This is
That's the difference.
I was so
what's the difference, Chris?
I'm saying what you missed was, I mean, I've watched 1,000 fucking horror movies that are demonic possession, this, The Exorcist, that, Satan, this, Satan, that. I have no problem with any of that. But if you show me a movie about Jesus where it's like Jesus is actually the Son of God, I have like this wall that goes up.
Yeah,
Nothing-
I have
Isn't
the
that
same
interesting?
thing, and
It's okay if it's the Exorcist and it's the Judeo-Christian devil.
devil. Yeah.
I also think
I'm,
for
like,
this.
I'm more than sure for a fucking reason. I like listening to
Actually, Chris, you're not
music.
saying too much about your own soul. That's good. I'm just sorry. Man.
No.
I will say this though. I do think the acting.
Well, we're all going to hell.
The acting is
There's no
really
beer in
great
heaven.
across the board in this picture.
yes.
Joseph
Joseph Fiennes and
some
Peter
of the-
Firth are fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
So some of the positive aspects, in my
Yeah,
opinion,
he's really good.
the acting, particularly though, I really like the supporting actor that Joseph talks to in the bar or the cannery.
Oh yeah,
who is
That
drinking.
that scene's fantastic.
Yeah. really
that
good.
that
Oh,
actor.
one of the soldiers. Yeah.
Yeah,
that,
the
that
other- the
actor
second
is
soldier
that he talks to.
phenomenal.
You
that
could see that
performance.
guy was dealing with some shit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like that was
it was
so
that was
well.
an
really
amazing-
exceptional.
Well, and
Yeah.
even the interview with the other one where he pulls the fucking flagon out from
what
under his,
what else was a lie?
Yeah.
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 Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
But-
good.
But he,
but
and he
the
just
scene in
turns
that- at
around
that
and walks
table.
away. He's
Yeah.
The
just
scene at
like,
that table, that actor was so strong. So you
Yeah.
could see every emotion on his
Yeah.
face that he ran through.
he was
um,
messed up. He was
It,
dealing
it
with
was,
it.
yeah, it was,
Yeah.
that was a gorgeous. But yeah, it's a bit of propaganda ish, a little
It
bit.
waits a long time.
Yeah,
to
but
get
so is
to
any
propaganda.
Bible movie.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah, but
and
John,
I didn't
what
know.
what I said was what you missed was like this movie doesn't tip its hand for a really long time. Like my Jesus filter didn't go up to like the last 10 minutes. Like when they finally
doesn't
like
it, wait a minute. Doesn't it go up pretty much as soon as the body disappears? These ropes exploded.
Well, we covered
Because-
this.
again for whatever like I'm still in I
No,
feel like
'cause
I'm
it's just
watching
a fantasy
supernatural thriller.
Yeah.
I'm
Uh-huh.
watching a supernatural mystery.
right.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it's just a fantasy movie, and the fantasy happens to be the Bible.
Right.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's like I was raised obviously very Christian. My mother's an ordained Episcopal priest.
Right.
Like I grew up with this in my life every week. I was an altar boy at church. Like I
Okay.
did
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And the thing that I like about this movie is it's just a movie. Like it's just okay, we have this story to tell, and we're not going to beat you over the fucking head with it the way that so many Christian movies do.
Oh yeah.
It's
That's the
Little
thing we
bit.
talk about. There's a quality issue. Most of these religious
it's-
most
it-
Christian
are
movies
very
suck.
low
Yeah,
budget.
if
they're
it's- yeah.
stupid,
If it's
and
not
they're all-
beating you-
they're literal. Like they're white, blue-eyed Jesus who can shoot lightning out of his fingers and shit like that. And it's like with a cast of nobody, and it was made for $45 in Utah. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, man,
That's
fucking
basically what you
Joseph
get.
Fiennes was in Shakespeare in Love and Peter
No,
Firth was
this
in
is
Life
this
Force.
is this is Kevin Reynolds or whoever whoever wrote it.
And
saying,
Handmaid's Tale.
well, let's make it a
And-
compelling film about Jesus Christ. That's
Right.
just that's you know
And
they
it
could
is-
have done a movie about
Oh.
penguins. It could have done it about astronauts. It could have done it about.
I found it very
left eye-
compelling.
Yeah,
I mean,
and-
as
yeah.
also as a a lapsed Catholic, it was like, oh yeah, I remember this.
Mhm.
I remember feeling this way. You know what I mean? It's
Well-
like it sort of struck those chords of it's like oh yeah, it's
Well-
like I don't believe
Well,
any of
it's
this
one
anymore.
thing when
Nobody-
everybody's
no,
But I
familiar with the
appreciate
story.
the beauty of this myth. I appreciate
Nobody's-
the beauty of this myth, and it also
nobody's-
made me think of watching a Marvel movie because Marvel, I think the superhero genre, back to even when it was comic books, really draws on this same kind of thing.
You
It's like
think?
this good person who has these amazing powers is going to make the world a better place,
Like that-
and it's inspiring. It's
So
And he's
everyone-
gonna do it today, Hans.
So in other words, when Joseph Biden goes into the room and sees all the apostles, and at the end of it's Captain America.
That was great.
It was Captain America instead of him.
It was Captain America.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's fine.
It was like Captain America picking up the hammer, you know?
Exactly.
Like,
That was pretty
damn,
much
that
it.
feels good.
And
That feels good.
Nobody's brought up Maria Botto's performance as Mary Magdalene.
She's
Oh, no,
really
she's-
quite good.
Yes.
Very, very nuanced.
The part where they bring her in and she's just staring out the window the entire time and she's smiling and
Yeah.
crying
Yeah.
at the same time, like it's a beautiful performance of somebody who is like, I don't know what's going on either. Like, much like Bartholomew, smiling Bartholomew, like
Yeah.
it's very much this performance of like, I don't know what I just witnessed, but what I witnessed is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Mind you, I'm going to slip my interpretation of this in right now because as we're talking about, and like the rest of you guys, I'm still a Catholic, and I believe in all this stuff. So that's just where I'm at. But imagine living in the world that this is 4 BC or 33 AD or whatever this happened. Everything's miserable and dirty, and there are lepers everywhere, and there's death, and the Romans are here.
It's
and
getting worse.
Every day you wake up, there's only a fair chance you're going to live to the end of it, right? Then some guy comes along, and at least the apostles and the people he meets, he proves that you actually have an eternal life.
Right.
That you are actually going to do this. And yeah, you would smile like an idiot to the end of your days if this is true. And that's what this film shows. It's like there's like a light went on inside of them. Like, oh my God, this shit don't matter no more. It's like, and that's what you kept seeing over and over to the end of the film. I thought it was a subtle way of showing something like that. That was like it was running to like a chorus, like
Right.
kind of thing, or
Right.
people
It was-
glowing ring.
Yeah. Yeah. it was-
Well, I love the scene
Uh-huh.
at the end when they're in Galilee, when they're out on the boat and
Mhm.
they've just failed at getting fish
Mhm.
the entire time. Just over and over again, we failed at getting the fish.
Try the other
And
side
they're
of the boat.
done and they're tired
Mhm.
and Jesus walks by on the
shore.
beach and he turns and looks at him and goes, try the right side. And they throw it over and there's so many fish that the boat stops.
Right.
He's
Your
like,
boat,
oh, we're
like,
caught on
creaked.
a rock. Like,
That was really well done.
yeah.
like
Everything's really well done in terms
Yeah.
of sort of like not being too cartoony or obvious. It's just beautifully rendered, these scenes. I loved talking about when Joseph Fiennes sees Jesus for the first time in the room there with Bartholomew and all the rest of them.
when you don't see him speak in
No,
that.
in the
Every time
first-
he speaks, they cut to behind him and you never see him
Yeah.
actually say
Right.
words.
Right. But Joseph Fiennes just looks at him and walks away. He can't
Right.
go into the room.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the director takes the time to have Joseph Fiennes go outside. He sends the other Romans away. He says there's nothing here. And then there's that shot of his feet
Mhm.
as he goes walking back in.
Yeah,
How-
right.
But how
Don't
could
get
you
Good stuff.
how could you deal with that? Like if because you saw him get crucified and die, you saw the spear go through up into his heart.
You saw
And-
his dead eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Dead
then you
eyes.
walk into the room and he's just sitting there and
Right.
he's showing people his
Smiling.
wrists and his ankles and his side. And it's
Right,
just like,
smiling.
I have to go over here now and not deal with this.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Because that's how any of us would do if we
It's
were
like,
in
nope.
that.
Nope.
Anyway, bye. Like,
All
and
right.
but then he goes back.
Right.
And like that's the turn for the character
Right.
is where he's like, okay, I'm not gonna have violence done here. Because he's a cop and he can
Right.
do violence whenever he wishes.
And he drops his
and
sword.
he drops his sword. And the apostles don't even notice really that he drops his sword because
No.
violence isn't part of their world at that point anymore.
Right.
You know,
It also
like-
was a very cool edit and camera movement when he disappeared. She puts her hand on his shoulder
That was
and there's a slight
Yeah.
tilt up and then there's a jump cut and he's gone. And it
Gone.
was really
Yeah.
well executed.
It was very nice.
I think this is an incredibly well-made movie.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
In Spain, all in Spain too. It's all
Yeah, it
all
looked
in
great.
Well,
spaghetti
Malta.
Western territory.
Malta
you know?
too, right?
And a
Malta
couple
too, yeah.
of scenes shot like outside of LA.
Yeah,
Like,
Did it
I
take,
know it's true, and in Malta too, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
did it take any of you guys a minute to adjust to the color palette because it looked so contemporary? Because like I said, I'm so used to these kind of things being in Technicolor.
Mhm.
You know, with like a
Oh, the G, like
bright
the
blue
Ben Hur style
sky.
thing. Yeah,
Bright blue sky. You know, really
no,
saturated.
this
colors
looks
and
like Vikings or The Last Castle or something like that. Like
stuff. It looks contemporary,
like the
Yeah.
Last Temptation,
but
really.
it looked beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautifully shot.
Yeah, but you know, it's good
well,
stuff.
and it doesn't hurt that everybody in this movie is so good looking.
Yeah,
Like,
well, that helps. There should be
Like, you
people
could-
should be
you could-
missing a lot more teeth in this film.
you could shoot. Oh yeah,
Straight teeth.
Uh-huh.
again. Bartholomew's teeth are completely on display through the whole thing.
Immaculate.
And it's like, what are you brushing your teeth with, son? Because that doesn't work in the real world,
Yeah,
let
right.
alone
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah, exactly.
And you
So-
can shoot Joseph Fiennes from any angle.
Oh yeah,
and
at that
it-
age, yeah, he's all good angles. Well, I guess we can do thumbs at this point. What do you think?
Did Jim get his corner?
Did you get a corner, Jim? Do you need a corner?
You know,
Color.
it was a lot better than I thought it would be. I'm a fan of Bible
Jesus?
fiction
Oh.
movies, and in fact, I wrote,
I'm a fan of Jesus.
I'm a real fan of
Jesus
Pilot.
is just all right with me.
Yeah. I wrote a libretto for an opera, which was performed in San Francisco and in Austria. We
Wow.
actually got money from the Austrian government, called Sub Pontio Pilato, which means under Pontius Pilate.
Mm.
And I even got in touch with a woman who just wrote a book on Pilate recently. She's the American editor of The Economist. She sent me a free copy after we talked. I was like, oh, good. I don't have to buy your book.
When was this? How recently was this, Jim?
It was the early 2000s, I think
Oh.
2003 or something.
Were you researching him to write the libretto?
I've researched Pilate since high school.
Ah,
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, I was looking, but I couldn't find it because I've organized my office. I have a pruta, which is a Israeli coin from 33 BC, which
Whoa.
Pilate issued, and he got into trouble for it because it has some Roman religious symbols on it. But anyway, it's a tiny little bronze
what a cool
coin.
thing to have.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
Pilate is in the Roman histories, and actually, it's not in.
Well, they
in the-
found
yeah.
he dedicated because he keeps talking about Tiberius coming.
Right.
Coming. He creates a temple that's dedicated to Tiberius, and they've actually found the inscription with his name on it.
Yeah.
Well, and you
So,
even
yeah, he
you even
is-
see them arriving in the movie.
Yeah.
Right towards the end there.
You know, I don't think that actually happened because I remember that Tiberius really never left Capri. He just stayed on the island with all his little boys, and
Yeah.
that's all he did basically.
I don't think he had to come to Judea to
Uh-huh.
see the thing, but it
Yeah.
was dedicated to him. But
Okay.
anyway, and what's his name talks about the Josephus, Flavius Josephus,
Yeah.
who's a Jewish historian, talks about the problems that Pilate had, like issuing these coins and
Mhm.
stuff. The weird irony is Pilate lasted like over 10 years as the governor, so he must have been doing something right.
Well,
no,
he
they
opened
they
it-
Other
liked him.
governors lasted
yeah, he
like
opened an
a year or
aqueduct.
two.
He's actually brought
Yeah.
fresh water into Jerusalem. He was actually kind of a cool guy. He
An
has-
aqueduct that's still in use
yeah,
today.
mind you, he did
Holy
kill
shit.
Jesus or had something to do with it. So there it is.
Yeah. Anyway,
Everything's a trade-off in life.
Brian.
Well,
It
but
was a lot of
he
fun.
kills Jesus specifically because the Jewish orthodoxy doesn't want to. They're
Right.
like, we can't do this. You have to do this for us. And he's like, all right, fine.
Yeah,
Like-
pretty much.
All
right, well-
that's why, actually, this would be a good double bill with Jesus Christ Superstar because they actually have very similar takes
Yeah.
on Pilate and Jesus.
Or the
and
Passion, because you
stuff.
remember the
Passion of
Pilate
Christ,
in the Passion is about as cranky as this guy is.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you?
I know.
be-
I would definitely be cranky. But
I
it's-
like. I
I
think
mean, they spend all that time just like, it's like in fact, there's a line in Jesus Christ Superstar, you Jews produce messiahs by the handful. It's like, what's so special about this one? You know?
Well, yes, there's so many millenarian cults that are going on at this time, and it's like, this is the guy who won.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, pretty much.
That's something Life of Brian had a lot of fun with.
Yeah,
right.
Which
Life of
I've
Brian
seen,
has a lot of history behind it too.
Yeah. By the way, Chris, I will say I have seen religious and non-religious scholars reference Life of Brian as being like, this is actually kind of what it was like.
The
Like,
most accurate.
Yeah.
The row of guys all like, and there will be fire.
Well, no, I specifically saw an atheist scholar being like, there weren't that many millenarian, but
yeah,
Life of Brian's pretty accurate. You would have 2 or 3, but you don't get these days. You don't get that many apocalyptic preachers out in the world, and then it shows the whole row of them.
Nothing else. This movie made me laugh at that movie 10 times more.
Yeah.
There it is. All right, that's it. That's Tom's time. Come on.
For that reason, I'll give it 3/4.
I didn't mind it a
I
bit.
enjoyed it.
That was great.